is Fran Vavras. I've been at the University of Minnesota since 2008, so this is my 5th year here. Before that, I was a professor at Teachers College, Columbia University for 8 years in their Comparative and International Education program. I became a professor in this field after completing my PhD at the University of Wisconsin in a comparative education program within a Department of Curriculum and Instruction. I've been interested in international education, comparative education for a long, long time. I didn't realize the field existed when I was an undergraduate, but when I began to explore international relations and foreign relations toward the end of my undergraduate degree, I realized that there might be a way for me to merge my growing interest in the field of international education with a more kind of politically edgy approach to it, and that's when I stumbled upon comparative education.
I actually got into international development through the back door. I taught program evaluation for about 13 years at the State University of New York at Albany and was invited onto international teams as an evaluation specialist, and over a number of assignments, people got to know me and liked my work, and eventually I was invited to be the team leader. And after a while, they forgot that I did evaluation and used me more often in team leader type roles. And one thing led to another, and pretty soon that was sort of the focus of a lot of my professional work. And that led to an offer to go to Washington to direct a USAID project, probably because I had been quite critical of USAID in my writing, and it annoyed them, and the message was, why don't you come and put your mouth where our money is and see if you can do any better. I don't know as I actually did any better, but I sure learned a lot, and after 3 years in Washington, had the opportunity to come here to the University of Minnesota, and I've been here now for about 13 years.
Well, I started out as an English teacher in K-12 education, and I taught in Minnesota and Illinois. And then I also have a background in special education. So then went on and got my master's degree actually in, this is going to sound strange, in communication disorders, because I'd always been interested in some of the issues of how people communicate and some of those challenges. And I think I've integrated that to some degree in terms of intercultural communication. But beyond the master's degree, then I went into the Minneapolis Public Schools in a central district leadership administrative position. And at the same time, completed my doctorate degree in then educational policy and administration here at the university. Urban education, I think, was very influential as it relates to thinking about international education, certainly global citizenship, certainly leadership.
Well, my entrance into the field of CIDE was informed by my background in political science on the one hand, and then on the other hand, my work as a classroom teacher in Jersey City. So I was always interested in questions of citizenship, nationalism, democratic theory, political participation, and contentious politics. That comes a lot from my background in political science. But then also having worked as a school teacher, particularly in the immediate aftermath of September 11th in Jersey City, which is located pretty close to the Twin Towers in Lower Manhattan, I had an opportunity to see how school service sites of political learning, political contestation, how they orient us in terms of national belonging, what it means to be part of the polity, appropriate ways to engage civically. So those interests motivated me to pursue my graduate studies, and CIDE wasn't exactly on my radar, but since it was an interdisciplinary field, I felt it would be a good home for me in terms of where I wanted to start asking the types of research questions that had motivated me both as a student, as an educator, and as a researcher previously.
My research has been primarily in Tanzania. This is a country that I became interested in when I was an undergraduate, at the end of my undergraduate years. I wanted to understand more about the experience of education, education planning and language policy at the end of the colonial era and during the first few decades of the post-colonial era up to the present. So Tanzania was this wonderful place for exploring that because of its rather unusual experience in promoting Swahili as the language of instruction in schooling at the primary level after independence, strong nationalist, African nationalist influence in the educational system. So I wanted to understand that better, and so I was able to go to Tanzania after studying Swahili for 2 years as a master's degree student. And after that first summer in Tanzania, I was really hooked. I decided this is a place I wanted to return to and teach, return to and perhaps eventually do research there. And that all came to pass.
Yeah, I then went to Peace Corps in Thailand, and teaching wasn't even on my menu of possible careers. And here I'm assigned to be a teacher in a new graduate university. So it wasn't even, as I said, it wasn't even on my menu of possible careers. And I found it was really, I really did like teaching. I had great students. And so then I fell in love with teaching. So then it made sense to eventually go into the international development education field. But before doing so, I thought it would be important to get practical experience. So after getting my doctorate in international development education at the CIDE program at Stanford, I worked for 4 years in the office of the Southeast Asia office of the Ford Foundation, doing work in education and the social sciences. And our office covered all of Southeast Asia. So that really gave me an opportunity to become familiar with the Southeast Asia region and to continue my interest in Thailand. For my doctoral dissertation, I had done 18 months of field work in Thailand. So that was sort of how I came to this field.
I'm Arthur Harkins. I'm an associate professor in OLPD and in CIDE. My areas of interest are the study of human futures, primarily the study of innovation and the study of what you might call cultural self-transcendence or creativity.
Much of my work focuses lately on higher education issues. Over the last 2 years, I was the team leader for a study sponsored by the Asian Development Bank of higher education issues in Asia. The Asian Development Bank is shifting much of their lending to higher education, but weren't quite sure what lending strategies and what issues they could lend for that would make the greatest impact in development. And our team was set out to look at that issue.
I think the central theme that has characterized my research, even though my research is very broad-based and covers many different disciplines. I've published in anthropology and sociology. I was in political science at Oregon for 22 years. The central theme that is there as a major focus is the issue of education and inequality, education and social justice. And also in more recent years, I've developed a strong interest in the concept of cultural democracy. I'm now actively involved in sort of the new multi-ethnic Korea and the challenges that they're facing by now having a much more diverse population. That's a new trend in many countries like Korea and Japan that are now becoming much more multi-ethnic, as is Europe.
My scholarship centers around leadership. And for instance, I have a research project in collaboration with a colleague in Turkey where we're looking at factors influencing principal leadership characteristics comparatively U.S. and in Turkey's secondary schools.
I would say that almost all of the research that I've conducted in Tanzania and elsewhere in the United States look at the intersection of representation, so the representations of particular populations and policy, policy-relevant research that we're working on, and capacity building. What do those terms mean? Why are they circulating today in the international development arena? What does it mean to be the one who builds other people's capacity or who is deemed in need of having their capacity built?
I would say that my work looks predominantly at processes of subjectivity, how schooling and educational processes more broadly contribute to how identities and subjectivities take shape and are formed. I think it's important to attend to processes of representation and how there's a politics that operates there too, between how groups or individuals are represented and how they choose to identify and think of themselves. Finally, I think in a broader sense, I'm very interested in the role between education and processes of social change, coming from a background in political science and looking at the relationship between schools and social and political outcomes, and how schools serve as sites of learning and participation and knowledge production about social, cultural, and political issues.
I should say that I'm actually a graduate of this program.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through this program in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and had a sense of what the program was like at that time, and have had the privilege to help reshape it in new ways. So early on in my work, I was doing some intercultural training work in schools here in Minneapolis, in the local area, as one set of research projects, and I involved a number of graduate students in kind of co-facilitating intercultural work and training in the schools. And I learn a lot from my graduate students, but it's also an opportunity for me to bring them into both training opportunities, education opportunities, but also research that's related to that. Another kind of project that I was fortunate to work along with, or to have, working with Dr. David Chapman, we've had a number of series of grants funded by foundations and external organizations. And in having those grants and creating these research projects, one of our commitments was to involve more and more graduate students. And over the years, what that has evolved into is having a course, an advanced doctoral seminar course that parallels our research grant work, so that in the course, students are actually, on the one hand, learning about, and they're kind of grounded in this actual research project, but we're learning about how it is that foundations, NGOs, other international organizations set agendas, fund different kinds of education programs, work together to actually implement education programs. How do we work to evaluate that and research that? And what are the kind of conceptual and methodological considerations when we work on these kind of research projects?
One of the roles I play is in developing the area of intercultural education and training. I'm very excited about the history of the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity that was developed by CIDE graduates Milton Bennett and Mitch Hammer. But I'm also excited about a new area called cultural intelligence, for which we are looking at this four-factor model to develop teachers, international educators, intercultural trainers, as well as mental health professionals. I also see a very natural intersection in the area of intercultural education in the work that international development is involved in, and how we can help those who go to developing countries, to the global south, for example, as we grow schools, as we grow high education and universities, as we grow just the social, economic aspects of the country, whether we do it with a cross-cultural lens that is country-specific, country-sensitive, and country-relevant.